Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever wondered how we trace human origins when ancient fossils are incredibly rare, especially somewhere like India?
Mhm.
Or, why some societies seem to have more children than others? We see these massive population shifts around the globe.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
So today, we're diving deep into some really interesting sources that tackle these exact questions. Our mission: to pull out the key insights, maybe spark some aha moments for you, and, well, perhaps challenge a few common beliefs.
And what's really interesting here is how we'll connect the dots, between anthropology, demography, even genetics.
Right.
We'll start by digging into the who, what, and why of ancient humans in India, and then we'll pivot to the more modern factors influencing how populations grow or shrink or change.
Which leads to a big question, doesn't it?
It does. How much of our collective journey is really shaped by biology versus, say, our environment and our beliefs?
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Let's start with um, a truly remarkable discovery, the Narmada Man. Why is this particular fossil so important? And what makes finding hominid fossils in India so tricky?
Well, India is kind of unique because hominin fossils are just so rare there. Narmada Man is one of the earliest ever found in the country. Its discovery really put India on the map, so to speak, for early human origins research.
And why so rare?
There are two main ideas. First, a lot of India's soil is acidic, and acidic soil unfortunately speeds up bone decomposition quite a bit.
Ah, okay.
Second, there's a theory, maybe less accepted but still out there, about early cremation practices being common. If that were true, obviously, no fossils left behind.
Makes sense.
So yeah, finding Narmada Man was kind of accidental but hugely significant. And it's old. We're talking maybe 5 to 6 lakh years old.
Wow, 500,000 to 600,000 years.
Yeah.
So it was rare, but what made this specific find so valuable for scientists?
A big part of its value comes from being found in situ.
In situ.
Yeah, meaning its exact context was recorded. The specific layer of earth, what materials were around it, the soil type, any tools nearby, all meticulously documented.
And that helps how?
Well, that kind of precise information is gold for researchers.
Ah.
It lets them build a much clearer picture of the environment back then and, the lifestyle of this early human.
So tell us about the actual discovery. What exactly did they find?
Okay, so the story begins in 1982 in the Narmada Basin. A scholar named Arun Sanakia found a calvaria, that's the upper part of the skull, along with some stone tools.
Good.
After a lot of analysis, it was classified as Homo erectus narmadensis. Then, a bit later, between 83 and 92, another scholar, a Nekram Sankyan, was excavating the same area.
Right.
And he found a clavicle bone, a collarbone. It seemed to belong to a mid-aged woman who they later called the Hathnora lady. These two finds, the calvaria and the clavicle, were used together to reconstruct what we now call Narmada Man.
So based on just those two pieces, what did Narmada Man actually look like? And what else did they find nearby that gives us clues about their world?
Well, based on those fossils, Narmada Man was likely pretty short, maybe around 135 centimeters, so less than 5 feet tall.
Uh-huh.
The skull suggested a really massive brow ridge, thick tooth enamel, and a kind of tilting forehead. But here's the kicker.
Yeah.
The brain size was surprisingly large, estimated between 1150 cc and 1421 cc. That's actually very close to modern human brain size.
Wow, really? That is surprising for Homo erectus.
Exactly. And as for their world, scientists used index fossils, animal remains found nearby like wild ox and elephant bones. These suggest Narmada Man lived in a habitat with pretty dense vegetation.
Okay.
They also found a bunch of sten tools, quite elaborate ones, resembling Acheulean and maybe even older Oldowan technologies. The sheer number of tools and the leftover chips suggests quite a few people were involved in making them. A whole community effort, maybe.
Right. Now, for the big question, the one that must have sparked a lot of debate, where does Narmada Man actually fit into the human family tree? I imagine experts didn't just agree on that.
Oh, definitely not. You're right. The phylogenetic debate, it got pretty intense. Arun Sanakia, the first guy, classified it as Homo erectus. Simple enough. But Marie Antoinette de Lumley argued the brain size was just too big compared to other Homo erectus fossils found in Asia. She suggested it was maybe an evolved Homo erectus.
Okay, a step further.
Then Kenneth Kennedy went even further, proposing it was actually early Homo sapiens.
Whoa.
And the most, let's say, audacious claim came from a Nekram Sankyan, the one who found the clavicle. He became convinced Narmada Man was Homo sapiens.
Fully Homo sapiens.
Yes, and he put forward this really controversial theory that the Narmada region of India wasn't just a place humans lived, but the actual site where Homo erectus evolved into Homo sapiens.
Wow, so evolution happened there, and then humans spread out from India.
That was his argument. He cited India's geography, climate, connectivity, all supposedly ideal. It directly challenged the whole out of Africa theory, which is, the dominant model.
That's a huge claim, especially challenging out of Africa.
Yeah.
What's the main hurdle for a theory like that? Why isn't it more widely accepted?
The biggest problem is often called the loneliness of Narmada Man.
Loneliness.
Yeah, meaning there's just not enough evidence. We have that one skull fragment, the calvaria, and one clavicle. That's it. It makes it incredibly difficult to definitively prove or disprove such grand theories. It really underscores how tough it is to piece together deep history from such, limited fragments.
Okay, so from the deep past and this sort of enigmatic single ancient human, let's fast forward to today and zoom out. Look at the bigger picture of human populations. It's interesting how those questions of who are we and where did we come from echo in how populations, grow or shrink today. Two terms often get tangled up: fertility and fecundity. Can you clarify the difference? It seems crucial.
It is, and they get mixed up all the time. Okay, so fecundity is your basic biological capacity to reproduce. It's the potential.
The potential, right.
Think of it like this. Everyone who is biologically able to have children is fecund. Fertility, on the other hand, is about the actual performance of a population. It's the real number of births happening.
So potential versus reality.
Exactly. You have to be fecund to be fertile, obviously, but just because you're fecund doesn't mean you are fertile, that you actually have children.
Got it. So how do we measure that reality, the actual fertility of a population?
We use a few key tools or measures. The simplest one is the crude birth rate, the CBR. It just gives you a general snapshot total births per 1,000 people in the whole population.
Okay, pretty broad.
Yeah. To get a bit more specific, we use the general fertility rate, or GFR. That one focuses only on the number of births per 1,000 women of reproductive age, typically defined as 15 to 49.
More targeted.
Right. And for even finer detail, there's the age-specific fertility rate, ASFR. That lets us see which specific age groups are having the most babies. Super useful for understanding specific trends.
Okay. Now, beyond pure biology, our societies, our economies, they have a huge impact on fertility. How do different types of societies approach things like population growth, the value placed on children, even birth control?
Yeah, absolutely. Barbara Miller's work gives us a really helpful way to compare this. Let's start with foraging societies, hunter-gatherers.
Okay.
There, you tend to see moderate birth rates and moderate death rates. Children have, let's say, moderate economic value because large groups can be difficult to manage when you're constantly moving and hunting or gathering.
And fertility control.
It's often indirect. Things like high physical activity, which can lead to lower body fat and delay ovulation, or prolonged breastfeeding, which naturally suppresses ovulation and helps space out births. It's more about natural regulation.
Right. And then what happens when societies settle down into agriculture?
In agricultural societies, things change. Birth rates tend to go up, often quite high. At the same time, death rates start declining, maybe moderately, thanks to better, more stable nutrition and care.
And the value of children.
It becomes much higher. More children mean more hands for farm labor, more power for the family, more influence.
Makes sense. So fertility control changes too.
Yes, it shifts to more direct methods. Things like induced abortion, maybe using specific plants or foods known to cause it, and sometimes, sadly, even infanticide, killing infants after birth.
Okay. And then fast forward to our modern world, industrial societies.
In developed industrial societies, we often see a completely different picture. Very low, sometimes even negative population growth rates. Birth rates can fall below the level needed to replace the population, and death rates are also very low.
And the value of kids.
It gets complicated, kind of mixed. It can depend a lot on social class. For lower classes, maybe more children are still seen as potential earners. For higher classes, fewer children might be preferred to avoid dividing property and to maintain social status.
Yeah, birth control.
It becomes very direct and, well, scientific. Widespread use of contraception, feticide, medical abortion, often aided by technologies like ultrasound.
And that brings us to something really eye-opening in the sources about ultrasound tech in India. What was the original idea there, and what does it tell us about policies sometimes having unintended consequences?
Oh, it's a really stark example. Ultrasound technology was introduced in India, partly supported by the government initially as a tool for population control, believe it or not. How? Through sex determination.
Sex determination for population control. How?
Well, The idea, or perhaps the justification used, was that if families strongly preferred sons, allowing them to determine the sex of the fetus and abort females could theoretically reduce unwanted births overall.
Wow.
But as you can imagine, it quickly spiraled into widespread female feticide, driven by that existing son preference. It became a massive social problem.
So the policy backfired badly.
Hugely. Eventually, gender revealing before birth was criminalized under laws like the PCPNDT Act, specifically to stop these sex-selective abortions. It's a classic case of how an incentive, even one aimed at a perceived problem like population growth, can interact with cultural biases and create a much bigger, more harmful issue.
And people still find ways around it.
Well, we even see things like IVF, in vitro fertilization, being used today not just for infertility, but sometimes for sex selection, allowing couples to choose the gender, often for a second child, if they already have one of the other sex.
Right. So beyond these big societal types, foraging, agricultural, industrial, what other specific socio-cultural things affect fertility?
Oh, there are quite a few. Things like industrialization and urbanization themselves usually lead to lower fertility over time.
Yeah.
Higher literacy rates, especially for women, almost always correlate with lower fertility. The status of women and their economic independence is absolutely critical. More empowerment generally means lower fertility rates.
That makes sense. What else?
The age at marriage is a huge one. Lower marriage age usually means higher overall fertility. The sources mention these striking historical examples from India where, grandmothers and mothers might be having children around the same time, leading to really high birth rates, like 6 to 10 kids per family.
Incredible.
Then there's widowhood, separation, and divorce. If a society forbids widows from remarrying, that obviously lowers potential fertility.
But societies adapt, right?
Exactly. Practices like divorce, where a widow marries her deceased husband's younger brother, show how cultures found ways to maintain fertility. It challenges the idea that, say, Indian society was always completely rigid or orthodox about these things, like some British observers claimed while missing these nuances.
Interesting. Keep going.
Okay, postpartum practices matter too. Some societies have a taboo on sex for a long period after birth. This is often linked to trying to improve infant survival, especially where protein deficiency might lead to high infant mortality. The mother breastfeeds longer, which suppresses ovulation.
And the taboo.
Well, to deal with men's biological urges during that long taboo period, polygyny, one man having multiple wives, often developed as a sort of social solution.
Huh. What about religion?
Religion is generally pro-natalist, meaning it encourages births. Most religions view children as a divine gift. Think of pitra rent in Hinduism, a kind of debt to ancestors you repay by having children.
But views differ on specific practices.
Yes, especially on things like abortion. Islam generally prohibits it, while some forms of Japanese Buddhism allow it, seeing life as more fluid.
And then there's the really big one in many cultures. Son preference.
Yes, son preference or son meta-preference. It's huge in patriarchal societies. It directly leads to higher fertility because families keep having children until a son is born.
And the consequences.
The Economic Survey of India pointed out serious issues stemming from this. It leads to unwanted girls who often face neglect, malnutrition, child marriage, lack of education, and are more vulnerable to things like prostitution and trafficking. And it also leads to missing girls. Those who were never born due to female feticide, or who die from infanticide or neglect shortly after birth.
Is this just a rural thing?
Not at all. You even see its effects in urban slums. These slums often provide the cheap labor cleaners, drivers, domestic help that high-income apartment dwellers rely on. It directly links economic inequality, family-size choices driven by son preference, and how our cities develop. It's quite different from, say, the U.S. model where higher wages might allow service workers to live in better conditions.
Right. Okay. Another factor mentioned is the frequency of intercourse. Seems obvious, but the source notes a paradox in India.
It does. Generally, yes, higher frequency equals higher fertility. But a study back in 1972 by Nag and others found that India actually had a lower frequency of intercourse compared to Europe, but higher fertility.
How did that work?
The explanation given is something called the lost semen complex. It's a cultural belief that semen is derived from blood, and so retaining it is healthier, leading to less frequent intercourse. The argument, kind of counterintuitively, is that this lower frequency actually acts as a form of regulation, keeping India's fertility from being even higher than it already was.
Fascinating cultural belief. Anything else on that front?
Yeah, a slightly surprising one. The absence of TV or other entertainment in some areas was linked to higher fertility rates, basically fewer leisure options in the evenings.
Okay, last one.
The family system itself. Joint families, where you have multiple generations or siblings living together, tend to have higher fertility. Why? More people around to share childcare responsibilities. The burden isn't all on one woman.
Whereas nuclear families.
Right. In nuclear families, where the primary burden of childcare often falls on one woman, you tend to see lower fertility rates.
Okay, so we've covered fertility. But population isn't just about births. It's also about deaths and health. What do the terms mortality and morbidity tell us?
Good point. Mortality is about death. It analyzes changes in population due to deaths. We usually measure it with the crude death rate, total deaths per 1,000 people. It tells us about life expectancy and what people are dying from.
And morbidity.
Morbidity is about sickness, the state of being unhealthy due to disease or disability. It's measured by things like the number of new cases, incidence, existing cases, prevalence, or something called Daly's Disability Adjusted Life Years. That tries to quantify years of healthy life lost to illness. Morbidity reflects the overall health burden and longevity in a population.
What are the main things that affect these rates, death and sickness?
A whole range of factors. Key ones include the quality and availability of medical facilities and infrastructure, nutrition levels, the general standard of living versus poverty, access to clean drinking water, sanitation and hygiene, levels of education and awareness, exercise and physical activity, how common infectious diseases are, the level of violence, crime, or war, and even genetic factors like inbreeding in some populations.
So why is studying all these stats, fertility, mortality, morbidity, so important? What do we actually do with this information?
Oh, it's incredibly useful for many things. First, population forecasting. Trying to predict future trends, like when a country's population might peak. India's forecast, for example, has shifted over time, now maybe looking at the 2040s.
Okay.
It also reflects the condition of living, the overall well-being and development level of a society. It helps assess public health infrastructure. Is healthcare accessible, affordable, available?
Right.
It's crucial for epidemiological studies, understanding disease patterns and their demographic impact. For instance, how diseases might disproportionately affect women and children versus men, which can have different long-term population effects due to factors like potential polygyny.
Interesting point. Who else uses this data?
Corporations, definitely, especially the insurance industry. They design their premiums based on mortality and morbidity statistics. Think about it. Lower premiums in places with super high life expectancy, like Okinawa, versus maybe higher premiums or stricter medical tests in areas with lower life expectancy.
Makes business sense.
And finally, and perhaps most importantly, policymaking. Governments use this data constantly to target specific problems, like India's big push to reduce infant mortality rate, IMR, and maternal mortality rate, MMR, through things like encouraging hospital births, using ASHA health workers, and providing financial incentives.
Okay, now we've got the building blocks, fertility, mortality, morbidity. Let's get into some of the big theories. People have been trying to explain why populations change for centuries. Let's explore some of these ideas, the ones that try to make sense of it all.
Right. And demography, the study of population, broadly categorizes these theories. You have biological theories focusing more on that potential, fecundity, and socio-cultural theories looking at the reality, fertility, and how society shapes it.
Let's start with a classic, probably the one most people have heard of, Malthusian theory. Thomas Robert Malthus. What did he predict, and why do we still talk about him?
Malthus, writing way back in 1798, had a pretty grim outlook. His core argument was that human population grows geometrically, like 2, 4, 8, 16, while resources, especially food, only grow arithmetically 1, 2, 3, 4.
So population outruns food supply.
Exactly. He predicted a massive catastrophic shortage, potentially leading to human extinction unless something intervened. He called these interventions checks.
Checks.
Yeah, he had two kinds. Preventive checks, which were things humans could choose to do, like marrying later or practicing self-restraint within marriage to limit births, and positive checks, which were things imposed by nature, like famine, drought, disease, war things that increase the death rate.
His big prediction of catastrophe didn't really happen, did it? Looking back, what was his main oversight? What's the lesson there?
Well, the big takeaway from Malthus being wrong is probably human ingenuity. His prediction didn't account for massive technological advances, especially the agricultural revolutions that increased food production geometrically, not arithmetically.
Right. We got better at growing food.
A lot better. And he didn't foresee widespread contraception or effective family planning either. Human population didn't explode the way he thought it would. We're at 8 billion, not his projection of maybe a 256 billion by now.
And critics like Marx had other ideas.
Yeah, Karl Marx famously argued the problem wasn't insufficient resources, but the unequal distribution of those resources under capitalism. Malthus also fundamentally confused fertility, actual births, with fecundity, biological potential, assuming humans would just reproduce unchecked without social factors intervening.
Okay. Let's quickly touch on a few other early biological theories. Thomas Doubleday's diet theory, Joe DeCastro's protein theory, Herbert Spencer's idea about complexity-reducing reproduction. Did any of those really pan out?
Not really, no. These early biological theories, Doubleday linking more food to less fertility, DeCastro linking less protein to more fertility, Spencer linking a complex life to less energy for reproduction, they all suffered from similar flaws.
Which were?
They mostly confused fertility with fecundity again. They made these, frankly, unscientific claims that things like being well-fed or having a complex, educated life somehow directly reduced your biological ability to reproduce. The real world just doesn't back that up. Rich people aren't necessarily infertile. Educated women have plenty of children, you know?
Yeah.
They miss the socio-cultural factors.
Right. So let's shift to those theories focusing more on society. Starting with Marx's view, we mentioned his critique of Malthus, but what was his own take on population?
Marx saw poverty and misery not as some natural law, like Malthus implied, but as a direct result of, as he put it, misconceived social organization, specifically capitalism and its unequal distribution of wealth and resources.
So how did capitalism cause overpopulation, in his view?
He argued that overpopulation, or at least a large impoverished population, is actually beneficial to capitalism. The system incentivizes the lower class, the proletariat, to have more children because those children provide a constant supply of cheap labor for the capitalists, the bourgeoisie.
And capitalists actively encourage this.
According to Marx, yes. They promote pro-natalist ideologies, the idea that having lots of children is good to ensure that pool of labor. Marxist feminists took this even further.
How so?
They argued that the capitalist class promotes the traditional nuclear family structure itself. Why? Because the family provides unpaid labor, the wife taking care of the current worker, the husband, and also producing and conditioning new workers, children from birth, all at no cost to the capitalists. It also makes workers less likely to demand higher wages or strike if they have a family to support.
Wow, that's a critical take on the family unit.
Okay.
Next up, Dumont's theory of social capillarity. That was a bit physicsy.
Yeah. Arsène Dumont used this analogy. He said the desire for economic prosperity and higher social status limits family size. He likened social capillarity, the pull towards having children and family obligations, to gravity, something that pulls you down or holds you back.
So the higher you want to climb,
the less burden you want. As aspirations to rise socially increase, individuals tend to control their fertility because it's simply easier to climb the ladder with fewer dependents.
Okay. And J.S. Mills had a similar idea.
Pretty much. J.S. Mills is famous for the phrase, development is the best contraceptive. He argued that economic prosperity itself, and maybe more importantly, the fear of falling back into poverty once you've achieved some comfort, discourages large families.
So both Dumont and Mills basically land on the idea that wanting a better life or keeping one makes people have fewer kids.
Exactly. Whether it's striving for upward mobility or maintaining a certain standard of living, many children come to be seen as an economic burden.
Right. Now, finally, let's talk about one of the most influential theories in population studies, the theory of demographic transition. What's the core idea here?
This theory, developed mainly by Thomson and Notestein, is really descriptive. It outlines how populations typically shift from having high birth rates and high death rates to having low birth rates and low death rates as a country develops. Specifically, as it moves from being rural, agrarian, and largely illiterate to being urban, industrial, and more literate.
And it happens in stages.
Yes, typically described in 4 or 5 stages. Stage 1 is the high stationary phase. Think pre-industrial societies. Both birth rates and death rates are very high and fluctuate a lot due to things like disease, famine, poor medicine. Population growth is slow or stable.
Then comes industrialization.
Right. Stage 2 is the early expanding phase. Industrialization starts, agriculture improves, basic healthcare and sanitation get better. This leads to a dramatic fall in death rates. But birth rates stay high because social attitudes about family size haven't caught up yet.
High births, low deaths.
Exactly. That gap leads to a population explosion. This is the stage many developing countries went through or are still in.
Okay, what's stage 3?
Stage 3 is the late expanding phase. Death rates continue to fall, but now birth rates also start to decline significantly. Why? Changing social values, more education, especially for women, access to contraception, urbanization, family planning becomes more common. Population still grows, but much slower than in stage 2.
In stage 4.
Stage 4 is the low stationary phase. Both birth rates and death rates are low and roughly balanced. Fertility might be around replacement level, population size stabilizes. This is typical of most developed countries today.
You mentioned 5 stages.
Yeah, some demographers added a stage 5, the declining phase. This is where the birth rate actually falls below the death rate, leading to negative population growth. We see this now in countries like Germany, Japan, South Korea.
This theory seems to describe the history of many Western countries quite well. But it's not perfect, right? What are the criticisms?
Definitely not perfect. A major criticism is its Western bias. It's based heavily on the experience of European and North American capitalist countries, and it doesn't always neatly fit the trajectory of countries in the global South. What else? It's also not really predictive. It describes a pattern, but it doesn't say when a country will transition or guarantee that it will follow these exact stages. It gives no time frame. Some countries, like Thailand or Singapore, manage to bring down birth rates much faster than the theory might suggest, effectively skipping the worst of stage 2's population explosion through strong government policies and awareness campaigns.
And it assumes people choose to have fewer kids.
That's a key point. The theory generally assumes fertility falls because attitudes change voluntarily. But that ignores situations where fertility control was coerced by the state. The most prominent example is China's one-child policy.
Right. That policy forced down birth rates. The attitudes may be followed later.
Exactly. And that policy, while it did control population numbers, had some really devastating long-term social consequences, didn't it?
It really did. Can you elaborate on those?
Well, beyond just controlling numbers, it led to a significant breakdown of traditional extended family structures. It created a severely skewed sex ratio because of the strong preference for sons, leading to widespread female feticide and infanticide.
The missing girls problem again.
Yes, and that skewed ratio resulted in millions of young men, often called bare branches, who couldn't find wives. This, tragically, became a major contributing factor to an increase in sex trafficking, both within China and from neighboring countries, as a desperate, illegal market emerged to procure wives. A truly terrible unintended consequence.
Okay, let's step back in time one last time.
Yeah.
We talked about Narmada Man. What about some other ancient ape fossils, the Miocene apes? Who were they and how do they fit into the story?
Right, the Miocene apes. This is a group of apes that lived during the Miocene epoch, which was roughly 23 to 5 million years ago, so much older than Narmada Man.
And they were found where?
All over the old world, really. Famous examples include proconsul in Africa, sometimes called a monkey-like ape, maybe representing the very beginning of ape evolution. Then there's Dryopithecus in Europe, and in Asia we find Ramapithecus, Civipithecus, and the huge Gigantopithecus.
And the Indian connection.
Ramapithecus and Civipithecus are the crucial ones here because they are the only Miocene ape fossils ever discovered in India, found primarily in the Shivalik Hills region.
Okay, let's zoom in on those two, Civipithecus and Ramapithecus. What did they look like? And did our understanding of them change over time?
It definitely did. Civipithecus was found first, mostly upper skull parts and some skeletal bones, in what's now North Pakistan. It was maybe around 5 feet tall, pretty hefty, 70 to 150 pounds.
Features?
It had eyes set apart, a flattish nose, large front teeth, and thick enamel, suggesting it ate tough things like seeds and nuts. It seems to have been mostly tree-dwelling, arboreal, though capable of some four-legged movement on the ground.
And Ramapithecus?
Ramapithecus was initially found nearby, just an upper jaw fragment. At first, scientists thought it was a separate, maybe more evolved species, possibly closer to humans.
But that changed.
Yes. Later discoveries, including a more complete jaw found in Nepal, showed it had a distinctive V-shaped jaw. And the prevailing view now is that Ramapithecus and Civipithecus are actually the same species.
Same species? How?
The thinking is that Ramapithecus was likely the female form and Civipithecus the male form. Ramapithecus fossils tend to be a bit smaller and lighter, consistent with female characteristics in many primate species.
Ah, sexual dimorphism.
Exactly. So, likely one species, living in trees, eating tough fruit.
Okay, so what was the big debate about their place in the family tree? Were they the point where humans and apes split off?
That was the huge question, and the answer really shifted. Initially, back in the 60s and 70s, prominent paleontologists like E.L. Simons and David Pilbeam looked at the fossils, especially that V-shaped jaw of Ramapithecus, which seemed somewhat human-like, and proposed exactly that. They thought Ramapithecus vipithecus represented the divergence point, maybe around 16 million years ago.
But genetics complicated things.
Big time. Around the same time, geneticists like Alan Wilson and Vincent Sarich were developing the molecular clock, using differences in blood proteins between species to estimate divergence times. Their data suggested the human-ape split happened much more recently, maybe only 8 or 9 million years ago.
So a direct conflict between fossils and genetics.
Yep, it caused a big stir. And interestingly, David Pilbeam himself later found that more complete Ramapithecus jaw. Looking at the whole picture, he actually revised his own view. He concluded these apes were not the direct ancestors on the human line after the split.
So where do they fit now?
The current consensus is that Ramapithecus and Civpithecus are more likely on the evolutionary line leading to modern orangutans, not humans. They represent maybe a transitional species towards orangutans. The actual common ancestor between humans and African apes remains elusive. That missing link is still missing.
It's a great example of how science corrects itself with new evidence, isn't it?
Absolutely. Constant revision based on better data. That's how it's supposed to work.
Okay, wow. That was a lot to cover. From ancient skulls to population theories to ape ancestors. Hopefully you listening feel a bit more informed. Let's quickly hit the main highlights again, just for active recall.
Sounds good. Okay, first, Narmada Man. Remember, India's rare early hominid, likely Homo erectus narmadensis, had that surprisingly big brain, sparked debate about its place, even challenged out of Africa. But its loneliness, very few fossils, makes big claims hard to prove.
Right, then fertility and fecundity.
Yep. Fecundity is the biological potential to reproduce. Fertility is the actual performance, the number of births, key difference. And societies find ways to manage fertility through all sorts of means.
And those societal influences are huge.
For sure. We saw how foraging, agricultural, and industrial societies differ vastly in family size, value of children, and birth control methods, from indirect things and infanticide, right up to modern contraception and even IVF sex selection. Factors like age at marriage, women's status, son preference, and its awful consequences like missing girls all play massive roles.
Don't forget population health.
Right. Mortality, death rates, and morbidity, sickness disability rates. Crucial stats for forecasting populations, checking living conditions, planning public health, even setting insurance premiums.
And finally, those big demographic theories we discussed.
Let's recap them quickly. Malthus feared geometric population growth outpacing arithmetic resource growth. Proposed checks. Critiqued for missing innovation and ignoring unequal distribution. Doubleday to Castro, Spencer. Early biological theories linking diet or complexity to fecundity. Largely unscientific, confused fertility fecundity. Marx. Argued population issues stem from capitalist organization needing cheap labor. Marxist feminists extended this to the family's role in reproducing labor. Dumont and Mills believed the desire for upward mobility or fear of poverty limits family size. Development is the best contraceptive. Demographic transition describes stages from high birth-death rates to low ones with development. Critiqued for Western bias, lack of prediction, and ignoring forced controls like China's one-child policy and its damaging social fallout, including trafficking.
And the Miocene apes.
Ah, yes, Miocene apes like Civipithecus and Ramapithecus from India. Once thought to be direct human ancestors, now seen as likely orangutan ancestors thanks to genetic data and more fossil finds, shows science evolving.
So, after all that, what does this mean for you listening? Thinking about these deep histories and complex modern dynamics, it's really clear that our biology is only part of the story, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Culture, economics, policy choices. They profoundly shape who we are, how many of us there are, how we live. It really makes you think.
It really does, and it raises a pretty deep question for today, right? If societies can be influenced, nudged, or even forced into certain demographic patterns, what does that really imply about the future of human reproduction? Where's the balance between, say, individual